All right. Let's get fired up here.
Maximum freedom. Read.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom. Read Rothbard.
Hello and welcome to the Actual Anarchy podcast, the podcast where we talk about movies from a Rothbardian and Anarcho-Capitalist perspective. We are back at it again, just the two of us. It's me and Robert. We can make it if we try. We've had guests on for so long before tonight, but tonight it's just me and my co-host, my buddy, my pal, Robert Johnson. How you doing?
You know, Daniel, I'm glad you asked because I am doing fabulous. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Well, I'm doing well in a relative sense. Like earlier today and for the past week or two, I've been feeling a little despondent and like
A $5 word.
lacking focus and direction, not making progress in anything in particular, and feeling the effects of that. But
Aimless.
Having our pre-show discussion with you, which is available for our pre-show Patreon supporters, I've perked up. You have lifted
Really?
me from my phone.
I turned it around. You were in the doldrums, and now you got your rudder. You got your heading. You're on your way.
You're like the magic man. You got that touch, man.
Oh shit.
So yeah. And if if we want to continue that trend, let's get some more Patreon people on there. So actualanarchy.com/Patreon. Or how else can they help us out with the show? I know there's a couple of ways.
They can tell their friends about us. They can rate us. They could buy a shirt from Trepster.com. They could do all kinds of stuff. But mostly you could rate us on like iTunes or like, tell people. Word of mouth is really hot. It's so hot right now.
Yeah, or give us comments in the areas where comments go, like on the Facebook.com/actualanarchy or YouTube.com/actualanarchy. Those are good things to do. And you can also check out and leave comments at actualanarchy.com/143, which is the show notes page for this episode on
Molly's Game.
Right on cue.
Molly's Game.
Right on
It's a
cue.
game.
Right on cue.
It's a game of poker, chance, skill. It's gambling.
Not Thrones.
No, I mean there's less murder, less
Beheadings.
nudity in this movie. It's still decent though. There's stuff going on.
Yeah.
Some drama.
Yeah. Well, we'll figure it out. We'll get into the last night's portion of the show and get into it proper style.
All right.
All right. Here we go. Hey everyone, it's Daniel Elwood and Robert Johnson, the Last Nighters, and the Last Nighters are part of the Launchpad Media, where they're always launching new ideas in your direction. Check it out at thelaunchpadmedia.com. Our show comes out on Monday, but there are other shows coming out every other day of the week, and most of them are a damn sight better than this one, but you're here and listening to us, so we appreciate that all the more. Tonight, we're going to be talking about Molly's Game. We're getting our poker face on to talk about this story of a driven former Olympic-level athlete who had a horrific accident and devoted her intense, focused energy on becoming a success in other somewhat nefarious ways.
What?
What? So my co-host is Robert. He is here, and he is our guest. We have no guest.
I'm your guest?
We often have guests, but tonight it's just the two of us. And
It's been a long time.
It has been a long time, and I think
Feels so intimate.
it's nice to pepper this in every now and again because I think our natural camaraderie, or I don't even know if it's natural. It's like it's been a skill, or it's been a long enough period of time and enough
Familiarity.
and
Hatred.
tenure to
Sexuality.
sexual tension, to make it, if we try, to kind of have a nice repartee. Throwing all these words around tonight.
You're spending a lot of money on words tonight.
I'm running low. Cash money in the bank is getting low. for this episode 86. We're so 86, it's almost 87. And by the way, next week, we do already know what we're going to be doing. It is going to be the Warriors.
Yes, the Warriors. And I have a special, hopefully we'll be able to do video because I have a special wardrobe for that episode. I was digging through my closet as I'm preparing to move out of this house. And I found an old leather jacket that I had in high school. And it's the kind of leather jacket that you would need if you were going to get into a rumble and you had just like a length of metal chain or maybe like a baseball bat with a nail in it, or I don't know, like a chair or something. It's not, I guess if you were a motorcycle rider, it'd be okay. Or if you were getting into a rumble. So I'll be wearing that next week.
Okay.
But it doesn't fit in with my normal wardrobe. I don't know. Shocking, I suppose.
All right. Well, tune in next week. And if you are a Patreon supporter, sometimes we get the live stream to work. Not tonight, unfortunately. But you'll be able to see video of this wardrobe change from Robert for the Warriors. Also, our guest will be Mike C., a returning guest, who is a lot of fun. And it's one of his favorite movies. And by favorite, I mean with a U, because he's Canadian.
What does Canadian have to do with anything about it?
You spell everything with a U in Canada, except Canada, apparently.
But Warriors? Canadians?
Favorite.
Okay.
Favorite. I'm not sure how they pronounce it. Hey?
Nobody knows.
But anyway, this is episode 86, as I was saying. So lastnighters.com/86 for show notes and more. Do give us subscribes or ratings and reviews on the old iTunes. That helps raise our profile and get us in front of more eyeburrs, which is how my 4-year-old calls eyeballs. But I think we want earburrs. Earballs? Something like that. Anyway. I'm just making shit up at this point.
Go with it, man. You're doing great.
Thank you. So let's get into the go-go description, how we usually start these things off. Molly's Game came out in 2017. Apparently had an NC-17 rating, according to El Google. I'm surprised by that.
Or what?
Yeah, I don't know. That might be a discussion point later on. But it is a drama/crime film, 2 hours, 21 minutes. Got 7.5 on that IMDb, 81% Rotten Tomatoes, 3 out of 4 from the corpse of Roger Ebert, and 86% of Google users like it. The description...
Nice to know that zombie Ebert's still getting work. I appreciate that.
He's still out there, still watching films, still giving his 2 cents. It's pretty amazing. I think
Let the man rest, unless he just wants to work. I mean, in that sense, go for it. Do what you want to do.
Could be a Walmart greeter at this point. All right. Here's the description. It says, the true story of Molly Bloom, a beautiful, young, Olympic-class skier who ran the world's most exclusive high-stakes poker game for a decade before being arrested in the middle of the night by 17 FBI agents wielding automatic weapons. Her players included Hollywood royalty, sports stars, business titans, and finally, unbeknown to her, the Russian mob. Her only ally was her criminal defense lawyer, played by James Bond himself, Idris Elba. Charlie Jaffe is the lawyer's name, who learned there was much, much more to Molly than the tabloids led people to believe. Came out on January 11, 2018 in Russia. Director is Aaron Sorkin, and the box office of $59.3 million. Screenplay, Aaron Sorkin. Nominations for Best Writing Adapted Screenplay, etc. I half expected Stringer Bell and President Bartlett to show up in this one. Your take so far, Robert?
Why does that name sound familiar? Stringer Bell. What is that from? That's some reference.
The
Have we
Wire.
done something?
The Wire.
Oh, yeah, that's his character. Idris Elba's character was Stringer Bell. That's right. Okay. Well, I just have one quibble. I mean, it's a fair recounting of the film. The movie jumps around a bit in time, starting off when she's just a kid and going back and forth. But the description says that she ran the most exclusive game in the world. And that's just a ridiculous statement. There are games in Macau where the buy-in is like $1 million when the blinds are $5,000 and $10,000. And trying to get into one of those games is not easy. Probably way harder than her game. Although her game was very, I'm not going to poo-poo it. It's very exclusive. She did a great job trying to find, a mix of celebrities and then guys with a lot of money that, could feed those celebrities. And the game seemed pretty lively. So in that sense, it's pretty accurate. I thought she did a great job for the most part. I mean, other than getting addicted to all kinds of drugs, I thought she kind of overextended herself strategically. But, I guess that's what you do when you're living the lifestyle.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation she found herself in, and there's a few different facets that I want to discuss with you. One of the keys being that she tried to do everything quote unquote above board. Like, she checked with legal counsel before even putting this thing together, and she was kind of fudging the line a little bit, or the law was a bit ambiguous and really open to interpretation and, subjective opinion. But she tried to stay on the side of not getting into legal trouble. And I guess I don't understand, like, why what casinos do all day long is illegal for someone else to do. And that was, she could do this for tips, and that was fine. That was above board. But as soon as she charged a fee, like a rake, right? That was like a percentage of a pot.
Correct.
For running the game, somehow, alarm bells, criminal activity has now occurred.
Right, and she only did that to mitigate the risk of having to cover in case of default, where she's the house, and she's on the hook, essentially, for all pots, right? So you go to one of these games, you buy in, you pay, like, you're in for like $100,000. You end up at the end of the night taking home $2 million. Well, it's not like you're going to get, however much money from every other player. It's Molly Bloom that's cutting you a check for that $2 million. If she doesn't actually have it, then her reputation tanks. People don't want to play in her game. Probably some bad people come after her. All kinds of things that are bad happen. So she takes that rake to mitigate that risk. But all of a sudden, according to the government, now she's being a bad guy. And it's all due to, these ridiculous laws that government writes that are subjective and open to interpretation and not evenly enforced, right? I mean, they only came after her, even if she ran a game in New York for 6 months where she took that rake because the stakes were so high, because she wanted to increase the stakes to actually get, these high profile people in to actually make the game work, right? Well, oh crap, I just had a total brain fart. Where was I going with that?
So she's trying to raise the stakes high enough to make it attractive to players, right? To get enough juice into the game. But in doing so, she was extending too much credit. And maybe that was her mistake. That was the thing that she was doing that she shouldn't have, that sort of backed her into the corner of needing to take the rake. But I think our point was the ridiculousness of all of a sudden it's illegal because she's charging a fee or a portion of the pot.
Right. And the only reason the government came after her in the first place was just because she was connected to all these other people that they were actually going after. It wasn't that, she was breaking the law and they were like, oh my God, this woman is out of control. We need to stop her. So many people are getting hurt, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, if we get to her, that gets us to all these other people. And, oh, by the way, look at that. On the books. Looks like she technically broke some law. Ha ha. Let's get her so that we can get these other guys. Let's shake the tree and see who falls out. That's all they were going for. And that really comes true at the end of the movie when they're just like, oh, there are these hard drives with all this dirty information on them. We'll give you total immunity. We'll drop all charges. We'll give you all the money back we stole from you in exchange for these hard drives. It's just it's a shakedown. It's extortion by the government to, get what they want. It's not that you're this horrible person and they're really doing a public service by bringing you down. She hadn't even been running the game for 2 years. So it's like she became a target due to the connections she had with these other people, not because she herself was this, dangerous person.
Right, and not only that, but they thought that she was more involved with them than she was, due to the mistake of her name and them not realizing that they're talking about the drug Molly instead of the person Molly, because their wiretaps or whatever surveillance, they kept saying Molly's name. They're like, oh, she must be really involved with these people if they keep mentioning her.
Right. Smooth. So classic.
But yeah, it was a really bizarre situation, and she pointed it out pretty well. I mean, there's a few moments in here where you're just like, holy shit, like they're making they go out of their way to back you into a corner. And I know we just talked about she got backed in a corner on her own terms, like needing to do the rake because she was extending too much credit. But when they arrest her, they take all of her money.
Millions of dollars.
Millions of dollars. They give her 2
Like
days.
$4 million they stole out of her bank accounts.
Right. And then middle of the night, they make her show up on the other side of the country, like in 2 days, to arraign her. And they do everything they can to make sure that she doesn't have the capacity nor the time to arrange her own defense.
Right.
And they even mentioned that 99% of charges get pled down to lesser charges, and then you plead guilty. When in those 1% of cases that actually go to a jury trial, they were saying something like 80% are found innocent. So they really do whatever they can to stack it in their favor and to basically bully you into accepting their offers, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And because she ends up pleading guilty, because the judge is like, this is ridiculous. Look at these charges. And he's like anti-Wall Street. So he's like, look at Wall Street. These guys commit more felonies, before breakfast than she has in her entire life. But, because she pleads guilty, he, gives her like 200 hours of community service, fines her $200,000. But because of that, she's now a felon. She can't possess a firearm. She can't vote. Not that I give a shit about that.
Yeah, I'm kind of okay with that one. No one should vote.
Yeah. Right. Nobody should have that power, but whatever. And also she can't go to Canada for some reason. I don't know. But because of that, right? Because she pleads guilty, now she's technically a convicted felon, even if the punishment was only community service.
Yeah, and I know
that's what happens to people all over the world, or not necessarily all over the world, but I'm sure in other systems too. But I'm only familiar with the United States system, where they absolutely, and it's probably a little extreme in her case. Most situations don't involve you flying across the country in the middle of the night or whatever, but they absolutely do, and at every level, incentivize you to plea down. Just plead guilty to a lesser charge. You'll get a slap on the wrist and be on your way. But if that gets you in the system, you're now a felon. And because of that, all this stuff happens to you. But it's better than the, trying to fight it, which is going to bankrupt you. It's a lot of innocent people, and innocent even in this corrupt system with all these bullshit laws, end up, getting in the system because it's just less of a hassle.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I know we're jumping to the end of the movie already, but the movie did a fair amount of jumping around in time as well, which foreshadowing, we're going to be doing that in a couple of weeks here. But the other insult to injury was the money they took from her in the civil asset forfeiture, which is basically they just take your money because they can, and you have really no recourse to get it back. And there was a recent case just a few weeks ago where that's now been questioned, or a limitation has been put on that. I forget exactly where, but I'll try to find it and post on the show notes page at lastnighters.com/86. But they not only took the money, but then the IRS came after her to pay taxes on the money that they took.
Yeah, all the more reason to hold physical gold and silver and other things. Because you just stuff all your money in a bank, and banks are all too happy to just hand that shit over to the government.
All right. So, Robert, I think you had a couple of things that you wanted to make sure that we cover, and maybe set the scene a little bit about the movie itself. We did the Google description a little, but maybe take us through it just a bit and then work in your points.
Okay. Well, she starts off meeting this dude in a bar where she's like a waitress, and it's like a high-end nightclub, and she's wearing like commie fatigues is like the get up, like Che Guevara style. And she meets this guy who wants to have her be his like assistant. So she's sleeping on a friend's couch and, you know, getting the guy bagels and whatnot. But it turns out that he plays in this weekly poker game with all these bigwig dudes. And so she kind of learns all she can to, you know, run this game. And apparently the one guy, player X, as she calls him, played by, help me, what was the guy's name?
Michael Cera.
Superbad. Michael Cera, Superbad guy, yeah.
But it's apparently
played by Cera.
Based on Tobey Maguire, the Spider-Man.
Exactly, based on Tobey Maguire. And apparently he was playing a lot of poker games. Not just this, but not just like in the high stakes games and whatnots, but also like playing like in Vegas tournaments and that sort of thing back at the time. I don't know if he still does, but he's kind of portrayed as like a jerk in this film. And apparently that's kind of like his MO. Apparently on the set of Spider-Man, Spider-Man 3, like nobody liked him. And like a bunch of people in the crew kind of like hired the actor who played Flash Thompson to actually hurt him during their scenes.
Wow.
But he ended up not doing it because he didn't want to get fired. So I guess that's fairly accurate. I guess Tobey Maguire can be a bit of a dick. So what are you going to do? So at one point, though, she's doing really well. She's getting like these thousands of dollars in tips each week from these guys because they're tipping her after the game. And Dean's like, you know, the housing market's crashing. I'm doing really poorly. Or no, she made the point that the housing market's going down. So this is right around 2007, 2008. And so Dean's like, well, I'm not going to pay you anymore for your, you know, regular assistant work for like $450 a week. And she's like, why not? And he's like, well, you're making so much more money at this poker game. So, you know, it's like nothing to you. She's like, yeah, but I don't want to pick up your dry cleaning for free. And he's like, well, you have to do both jobs or else you're going to lose the game. So she's like, well, screw you. And she had all the information on all the players. So she just sets up her own game. And yeah, she moves it to like a hotel. She assumes all this risk. She basically spends every penny she has to like hire, you know, workers and a table and hire a dealer and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's successful.
Well, you know, I want to interject just for a moment here. During that negotiation with Dean, who is kind of an asshole, and he called them Negro bagels or poor people bagels.
Yeah.
He said to her, "You don't have any bargaining power here." And I just thought that was a jab at this pro-union jab, you know, like that the capitalist exploiter has all of the negotiating power and the lowly worker has none. And it just kind of pissed me off. But then she sort of steals the game from him.
Yeah.
In a way. Now, I know that it's not, you know, like his property, right? Like your profits aren't guaranteed. Like if a store opens up across the street from you, that may harm your business, but you have really no recourse. Like they didn't commit any aggression against you.
Yeah, she wasn't forcing all the players to come play at her game, but she was just inviting them to.
It was a little shady though, because she fraudulently provided false phone numbers to the new person who was taking over the invitation thing.
Yeah, what did you think about that? I didn't have a problem with that at all. I mean, yeah, she did lie, but I don't think she's under any kind of positive obligation to give her actual numbers. Did you?
Well, I mean, they asked, of course, for the actual numbers, and didn't think that she would give them false information. But she had been fired at that point. So yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a fuck you, a little retaliation.
Yeah, and why doesn't he have the actual numbers on hand too?
You know,
why is he relying all on her?
Yeah, you know what? That's great. Yeah, that would have circumvented this whole thing because he provided the numbers to Molly originally,
Yeah.
and he's such a lazy fuck that
Yeah.
he's like, "All right, new assistant, just get the numbers from Molly and move along."
And why wouldn't you do that before you fire her? That just makes no sense.
Yeah, a little bit of a plot hole. But when she does offer this new, better product at the top of the Four Seasons, it is a competition. Like, and those players could have gone back to Dean at the Viper Club or wherever they were playing, the Cobra Lounge. Forget the name exactly.
Yeah, I think that second thing you said was right.
But the player X, the Tobey Maguire guy played by Michael Cera, he was like, "No, we're good here. Let's play." So they were a little bit like deceived a bit, but then they were kind of okay with it. I mean, they had this nice posh layout at the top of the Four Seasons, beautiful view, professional dealer, nicer environment, all that stuff.
Yeah. They're like, hey, this is better. Maybe this is cool. And maybe I don't like Dean so much. Maybe I like Molly better than I like Dean. Maybe it pays to be nice sometimes.
Yeah, it seems to occasionally. And then let's see, I have a note in here about don't break the law when you're breaking the law. And I think that was related to make sure that, while you're doing something that might be somewhat suspicious or draw attention from law enforcement types, don't do anything that is explicitly illegal in the process of doing it. So don't, be dealing with drugs or prostitution or other things that should all not be, illegal anyway, but they happen to be. And I think this was her lawyer's advice, right? Make sure you're not doing anything that will actually get you in trouble.
Yeah, even though I have zero problems with anything she does in this film, like morally. Like, I don't think it's a good idea to get addicted to drugs and whatever. And you're probably, hanging out with people who are murderers, but, people think politicians are great and hang out with politicians all the time. And I don't know. I did have one note here where apparently in the law, it's written that, if you take a rake on a game of chance, it's illegal or something like that. And so Molly says, no, it's not a game of chance, it's a game of skill. And I would say that both are correct and incorrect. It's not just a game of skill and it's not just a game of chance. It's both. It's a game of chance that is mitigated by skill. You can lower the risk by having increased skill, but you can't eliminate it entirely. Of course, you're dealing with a random deck of cards that are randomly dealt. It's not, there's nothing you can do sometimes. Sometimes you get your money in good and you still lose, on a 2% chance. It's just, it happens.
Well, as we saw with Bad Brad winning against Harlan, just accidentally, and Harlan was a decent player. He knew what he was doing. He was cool, calm, collected, very calculating, very conservative. He would win a lot.
No, Bad Brad bluffed Harlan. It
Right.
was the other guy. It was the like the prince or something that got lucky with running kings.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. There were like two things. One set him off down this downward spiral, and one finished him off.
Yeah, Bad Brad tilted him. And he was like, oh, you just totally bluffed me when I had a full house, queens over eights or whatever. Queens over nines. And then he goes on this bender where he's losing $1.2 million. And the final capper is this big pot against this like prince guy from Monaco or whatever, where the guy hits running kings. So that's running kings is less than a 1% chance.
Right. So if
he
we were
got super lucky.
if we were watching World Series of Poker, like the percentages would have been, all right, Harlan is at 99%.
Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah. Running the two cards in the deck that he could have hit, he hits. It's just ridiculous. Well, 2 out of 3, I think. 2 out of 3? Because he had king, ace, king versus pocket queens, and it was queen something. Anyway, I forget exactly. But yeah, it was an insanely tiny percentage chance of actually winning. And yeah, he got super unlucky. But that game was interesting, not only for the Harlan guy, But I thought the bad Brad guy was really interesting, that he was losing on purpose, that he didn't give a shit because he was actually just making business connections and hanging out with people that had money to gamble, basically, of course. And so he's like, well, hey, why not invest in my hedge fund? By the way, it's a Ponzi scheme. I'm not going to tell you that part, but go ahead and I'm going to lose money here and, sign you up to my hedge fund where I actually, even though I'm a bad poker player, I'm a really good hedge fund manager, supposedly. So you can go ahead and invest with me and feel good about it.
Yeah, that was actually really interesting. And it had played into why Harlan couldn't read him, because he was so bad and so didn't care that he didn't display any signs of stress when he had nothing, when he's bluffing, like if it had been a legitimately good player who knew what he was doing, he would have been having a tell, right? But bad Brad had no tell because he didn't even know what he had.
And even if he did have some kind of inkling about what he did, it just didn't matter to him. He came there specifically to lose money, to engender friendships, to get people's business. He wasn't he wanted people to have a good, view of him. Like, as in, I'm glad you're here at the table. Let me win some money off you. But in reality, he's the one taking the money off of them.
Right.
It's really, it's like the hunter becoming a hunted. I thought it was genius, even though he was a scam artist, obviously, and stealing people's money. He's a terrible person. But completely committed fraud.
Yeah, but it was his lost leader. It was getting them in the door, and it was brilliant. And I think that someone could employ that portion of the strategy in other areas and provide a legitimate service, and actually do very well with a strategy like that.
Absolutely. Let's say that Brad wasn't just a Ponzi scheme guy, but an actual hedge fund manager. That's a great way to actually get customers. I thought it was fantastic.
Right. And then Molly was making a point that, the people who are playing this game are the elite, most accomplished people in the worlds of business, Hollywood, sports, etc. And something to the point of they wanted to be involved in something that they had to work really hard at to try to win.
Right. Yeah. You can't just buy your way to victory in poker. I mean, you can have more chips than the other guy and you can kind of bully people around, but you're playing against other millionaires. So eventually it comes down to your skill versus their skill. You can't just, pay to win, so to speak. So that was really an interesting, it's why those sorts of games really appeal to those people.
Yeah, so
right, Daniel.
I agree. Yeah, circle gets the square. So we also have a dabble into psychology in this film when we talk about the relationship with Kevin Costner, the father, who's apparently the father in lots of movies these days. He was Kent in
Superman's father, yeah,
Superman's dad, and Molly Bloom's dad, and
probably a bunch of others.
Whitney Houston's dad in The Bodyguard.
No, he was the bodyguard. He wasn't the dad.
But it was kind of interesting at the end how she's going through all this stuff with James Bond, Idris Elba. He's going to be Bond, right? That's what I heard. Some rumor.
There's been rumors of him doing it, but no. Now the new Bond is a female Bond.
Oh, right.
Yeah. But he's long been rumored to take up that mantle. I wouldn't be too surprised if he did it at some point, but he is getting older. It'll have to happen within the next 10 years, I would imagine.
Right. I think he'd actually be pretty good. And not in the, hey, we need to spice things up by changing colors and genders of well-known characters. I just mean I think he's a pretty intense and good actor.
Oh, yeah.
I think
I'm a fan of his on The Wire. I mean, and in this movie and in most movies, he definitely has a certain presence to him. I think that he could pull off a Bond for sure.
Right. So what the fuck was I talking about? Oh yeah. So Elba's talking to the prosecutor after their exposure in the Molly situation.
Yeah.
And he's trying to work a deal, and he tells Molly to head on out and go grab a bite to eat, whatever, while they chat. And she goes to the skating rink in Central Park, and for whatever reason has acid flashbacks to skiing down the hill and having her bad accident, which was horrific, by the way, as depicted in the film. But she's like trying to get the guys to chase her or whatever who are running the rink, and they're like, "Hey, you're going too fast, slow down." She's like, "Fuck you guys, catch me." And then her dad just happens to be on the sideline and spooks her, and she crashes into somebody. And I was like, "What the fuck? Why is her dad there, just magically?" Did that bother you?
Well, it struck me as a screenwriters convention. Like, obviously, this event didn't happen, but I kind of need this scene for what I want this movie to be about. So I'm going to have her dad magically be there. And just like he's so in tune with her psychology that he knows where she's going to be.
He's just that good.
Yeah. It bothered me as a real point of realism, but I do recognize that this movie is, anytime you retell like some sort of biography, you're going to condense things. You're going to, give lines to some characters and not others, not even condense different characters down into a single character. You're going to do all that because, the actual story is just way too complicated and have way too many characters in it. And, it wouldn't be a cohesive film. So in that sense, I gave it a pass, but yeah, I understand anybody that had a real problem with that scene would be like, really? He's there just magically when she just on a lark happens to go to the ice skating rink and trade her thousands of dollars worth of gloves for an hour's rental of some skis or whatever, $800 or whatever it was.
Yeah, for skates.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. And this whole like plot line I could have done without. I mean,
the dad.
Yeah, and I like Kevin Costner, and I don't mind seeing him in a movie, but it's already a 2 hour and 20-minute movie, and then you kind of shoehorn in this teen angst that she didn't understand why she was angstful against her dad, and he finally figured it out. It was because when she was 5, she saw him doing something, and she didn't realize what she had seen, and that tainted their relationship with her growing up because she was unaware that she was aware that he had been having infidelity against his mother, like cheating on his mother or her mother.
Yeah.
And so this all gets pieced together. Like, here's 3 years worth of
Psychology
in 3 minutes, whatever. Yeah. It's like, why did you push me and didn't like me as much as my brothers? And it was all because he felt this guilt that she knew, and so he treated her worse without really realizing it. And maybe there's something to that kind of thing, but I just felt like, why are you telling me this in this movie?
Yeah, the movie did certainly tried to have a heart instead of just being like a dry retelling of, this lady's, gambling ring / trial. And maybe it was a little bit crammed in there. And maybe it didn't fit super well. I thought it seemed like it was maybe a little bit clunky way to, address that sort of stuff. I mean, I guess the movie wanted to explain why she was so driven to do what she did. And I don't necessarily you need to have that. I feel like you can take this story and tell it any number of different ways. But what was his name? The director? Sorkin.
Yeah, and he's a very dialogue heavy guy.
He is. He's done a lot of good stuff. I generally like his stuff. Not that I could name one of his movies off the top of my head, but I bet you if you read me a list, I'd go, oh yeah, that's good.
I'll read you his list. Molly's Game.
Okay, go ahead.
Molly's Game.
What? He has one credit?
This is his directorial debut.
Okay, well, he's written stuff then.
And he's done a bunch of television shows. He did The West Wing.
Oh, he's the West Wing guy. Okay. I was thinking of somebody else. Huh. Okay. Well, anyway, I feel like you could tell this story any number of different ways, focusing or non-focusing on different areas of her life. But I didn't mind the way he did it so much.
Riddle me this.
Having this driven, ex-Olympian, that goes on to basically succeed at all costs, sort of, is a kind of an interesting story.
Well, riddle me this, Robert. What is the story? Because by the time I'm done watching this,
yeah,
I'm like, okay, why did I watch this?
What was that about? Well, it's true. The finale is very kind of not very, exciting. It's kind of a letdown. I wouldn't say it's very climactic. It's like they're at the trial, and then the three judges just like, yeah, never mind, this is dumb.
But they still fuck her over.
Oh yeah, they still fuck her over, and which is why I thought it was interesting from a libertarian standpoint to talk about how the government basically kneecaps her, robs her, and then still fucks her over in the end, and then she feels, thankful to them somehow, right? And that's how the government does it, right? Like, we could have fucked you over way worse. You should be grateful for us.
Yeah, this is
like no, you fucking thug trash.
That great Harry Brown quote where government is, where they break your legs and then offer you a pair of crutches, and you're supposed to be thankful.
Yeah, then you wouldn't be able to walk if not for us. Yeah, so it's just that classic action of this is what the government does all the time, and yet it still gets a pass, right? I mean, it's never, they don't get called out for the extortion and the thuggery that they carry out on a daily basis.
Right, but
it's like people feel thankful for them. But I mean, why you watched the movie? What was this movie about? It was a driven woman's, interesting, career choice path, and then
celebrity
and then legal trouble. I don't know.
Drugs.
I've seen worse biographies.
Drugs and money. All right. Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, you saw it and recommended it a couple of weeks ago, and I was going into this thinking, oh, it must be pretty good. And then we watched the first half 2 nights ago, and then the second half last night, because we're old and fuddy-duddy, and we can only keep our old eyes open for so long. And I think I messaged you the other night, and I was like, halfway through, convoluted so far, not sure what's going on.
And then you finished it, and then did you feel better about it or no?
I mean, it makes more sense, but I just don't know why it's a story. Like, in the movie, they say she wrote the book to try to earn some money because they'd taken all of her money, and she needed some way to pay off some debts or whatever. And so that's why a book exists. Why a movie exists on that book, I don't know. Like, I don't know.
Well, she had 5 authors, apparently, to turn it into a movie.
Right. And only if she would spill the beans, spill the dirt, all the dirt. And so I guess that goes into, what was your perception of her character, what she was made of? Like, I thought she seemed to have certain principles that she was not going to deviate from.
Yeah, because she was worried about, she recognized that her reputation, her name was super important.
Because it stood for something in the relationships she had with the people that participated in her game. She was their confidant.
Right. Like imagine if you went to she basically kind of operated as a shrink, right? I mean, if you went to a shrink and then you found out later that the shrink was blabbing your stories all around town, and that shrink would be ruined, right? No one would ever go to that shrink again. She kind of operated like that. Not only did she have inside dirt on all these high-profile people that would totally destroy and ruin them totally. I mean, there'd be scandal after scandal after scandal. I mean,
Right, but those people did those things that are scandalous, not her. She didn't do those things.
Correct. She feels like at one point she says that she felt guilty for making money off of gambling addicts. And I quibble with that. I mean, you could say, then what, beer makers are morally responsible for people who buy, alcoholics? Alcohol producers are morally or this is the people who blame gun manufacturers for gun deaths.
Exactamundo. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, but yet, nobody blames Ford for, automobile deaths. I don't know why some manufacturers get a pass and others don't. I don't understand it entirely. But all I know is that the government gets a blank check for everything, no matter how many people die. Did
you see the tweet today from Bernie Sanders?
What genius did that genius speak about?
He said that the CEOs of fossil fuel oil companies should be held criminally responsible for the catastrophic damage they have caused the environment.
Do they also get all the accolades for all the energy that they've provided?
That was my comment in the Tom Woods group. I was like, so what about all the millions of people's lives who have been improved as a
Yeah.
an abundant source of cheap energy?
Yeah, all the people that are able to travel to a job, in their cars, all the people that are able to heat their homes cheaply. Well, I mean, this is ridiculous. They get all the blame and none of the, they get the benefit of, the money, which is the signal from the market saying good job. But then you get hucksters like Sanders virtue signaling about how evil you are for providing all this value to the market. He can get fucked.
I think they're getting desperate. All those Democratic candidates, they're trying to out socialism each other, and out virtue signal each other, and out what is it, the oppression Olympics? Like Sanders can't win because he's a white guy. He's an old white man, old rich white guy. And
right, according to his own philosophy that he adheres to, he should step aside so that like Kamala Harris can go ahead.
I mean, if he's going to be consistent, I know 4 years ago, 4 years ago, during the run up to the other election, that was a time when apparently it was still acceptable for a man like him to run, but now it doesn't seem like it's so acceptable on the social level.
Yeah. I mean, they've gone so far to the left that they just keep trying to out left each other.
Right, and this isn't my opinion. I don't think anyone should run.
Well, I think it's setting up for another Trump victory. I can't imagine that the mainstream America is going to vote for whoever super ultra lefty comes out of the Democratic nomination.
I think it's going to hinge on where the economic indicators seem to be blowing at the time.
Maybe.
Because Trump is going to wear whatever the economy is on his chest.
He has, right. He has taken ownership of it. Stupidly, probably, but I mean, in a world where the Fed chair can come out and make one statement and essentially crash the economy.
Right. Now, it is potentially 17D chess. I don't know how much I ascribe to that, but he does seem to do some 3 or 4 level moves occasionally. And he has been starting to throw the Fed under the bus recently. I heard something the other day where he's like, oh yeah, we could be doing so much better, but the Fed won't lower interest rates, which is more of the wrong thing, but it's sort of
artificially inflate more.
Right. But it sort of sets up that fall guy position,
Right. No, he is digging the foundation for an escape plan. Right. Some kind of a fall guy to be like, yeah, if only they had not, done what I said, 6 months ago, then we wouldn't be in this situation. But I don't know if it'll be enough. It's possible.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. I mean, it's Murray Rothbard. He was a big, fan of the entertainment value of politics. He would pay attention to it and, of course, laugh at them. And so I get that. I mean, you and I, we went back and forth on election night 2016, and we were just amazed at the entertainment value provided therein.
Yeah.
But, if you can't laugh at this stuff, then you're just going to be depressed about it.
Yeah, exactly. It's a big, giant dog and pony show. And even though it's all, the mafia trying to explain why, the mafia is fantastic and why everybody needs the mafia, or else, the world just doesn't work without the mafia. It's endlessly fascinating. Like, I like mafia movies. I love The Sopranos. It is fascinating to see psychopaths try and explain why they're, humanitarians. But the fact that the average person just eats it up with a spoon, or is like barely paying attention and just goes along with it. It is saddening. Like you said, either laugh at it or you cry.
Yeah, it's problematic. Now, you mentioned the mafia, so that will bring us right back into the movie. When Molly loses the game in L.A. because, what's his bucket, basically screws her out of it. And I forget exactly why. I think she called him out on something because he was financing another player at the game and had the potential of impropriety, and he didn't.
Well, let's talk about that real quick.
Okay.
Because I wrote a big old note about that. So this all stems from when Harlan loses the 1.2 million. She's like, he goes to Molly and he's like, I don't have it. And she's like, well, we'll figure this out. Don't worry, Harlan. Just go home and talk to your wife. And, a couple days later, he shows up with a check and he's like, here you go. It's fine. And she finds out that it was Tobey Maguire that had loaned him the 1.2 million. And she's like, well, why did you do that? And he's like, well, I get 50% of his winnings until it's paid off. And then 50% of his winnings for the next 2 years with no exposure on any losses. And then Molly complains about this. She's like, that's sharecropper math. That's usury and racketeering. And I'm really annoyed at anybody who complains about usury. First of all, usury is just your reward. I mean, you're accepting a whole bunch of risk when you're loaning money to somebody. So why shouldn't you get something in return for that risk you're taking?
Well, the time value of the money as well. And usury in the common parlance is just an excessive amount of interest. Some's okay. I mean, it used to be that usury meant any amount of interest was illegal.
So what would usury be then? I mean, this is some sort of weird subjective bullshit number then? Just make up some number?
Yeah, I think so. I think in Molly's opinion, 50% of wins and no exposure to losses was excessive. And she was saying, you could get better deal than that on the street or something like that. So I think that's why she was pointing it out as usury. I think she would have been okay with a certain amount of interest being charged, but she also had an issue with a participant who plays at the same table staking another player.
Right. She was worried about any kind of collusion that could be happening. But to go back to the Harlan deal, and it's just for a second. If Harlan could have had a better deal, he would have taken it. Tobey Maguire didn't have to offer him that. And Harlan didn't have to accept that offer. Harlan could have gone to a bank, could have gone to anybody else, asked for 1.2 million.
He could have gone to Bad Brad.
Could have gone to Bad Brad. Could have gone to anybody. Could have gone to Molly herself. But she's upset with Tobey Maguire because he did it and because of the terms of the deal. The terms of a deal are none of her business. It's between Tobey Maguire and Harlan. She can complain all she wants, but it's none of her damn business.
Well, if she's going to complain about that, though, then she needs to complain at her own self for continuing to re-up him when he was sort of on his tilt bender, right?
Right.
He was not of sound mind when he was doing that, and she kept staking him and kept not staking him, but kept letting him buy back in on credit.
Right.
Now, yeah, she tried to stop him, but he was so insistent that she relented. But how is anything that she did that much different than what Tobey Maguire did?
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a problem with anybody doing any of that. It's on Harlan ultimately. He's a big boy. He's an adult, and yeah, he's probably not in the greatest frame of mind at that point. But neither Tobey Maguire or Molly is Harlan's keeper. They're not Harlan's mom and dad. He's an adult.
He could use a friend to suggest maybe you don't do that.
Right. You could definitely use a friend who's like, maybe you shouldn't, snort 5 lines of cocaine and get tilted on poker and lose $1 million. That's probably a nice thing for a friend to do. But I'm not saying that Tobey Maguire and Molly are terrible people in this instance. They are respecting him in his decision making. They can offer suggestions maybe you don't seem super great right now, but it's ultimately Harlan's responsibility to take care of Harlan.
Do you think that maybe this is a cinematic device in that Molly did the same thing and she felt guilt for it, so she lashed out at Tobey Maguire, and it's echoed later with the father in that situation?
Yeah, I would say that. She feels guilty about, supposedly making money off of gambling addicts. And this is one of the situations she feels badly about, enough to write in the book about it.
Right. I mean, the Harlan guy was 2 days prior to this happening, he was like all excited about his wife's birthday coming up, 40th birthday, and all this stuff was planned. And then he gets into this multi-day string of playing poker because he lost that hand to Bad Brad. He's like, I got to win it back. I got to win it back. Is that the gambler's trap, or what do you call that?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
I'm due. I got to just win. I just got to get back to even.
Got to get back to even. I can do it. Yeah, that's why. That's how casinos make their money, because they take away the clocks and everything else, and they cover the windows. They don't have any windows actually. So yeah, they just want you in there playing because they know ultimately the odds are in their favor. So the longer they can keep you there. Now, in a game of poker, though, I would say that that's less of the case. I think a skilled poker player can have a better chance of getting back to even than in just playing like slots or some table game like roulette or something like that.
Right, but Harlan, in his case, abandoned all of his principles, like all of his normal capabilities of playing the game well. Like he abandoned all of his strategies.
Right, and the more you go into the hole, the more you're looking for that one big score to get you back to even.
Yeah,
so he's like
run.
Basically, right. He's just taking all kinds of crazy risks to try and get that one big hit back so that he can go, oh, okay, and calm down and play back his normal game. But anyway, he's a big boy, but I think she had more of an interest in, or a better argument when she was talking about having, a guy who was staking a player at the same table. Now, I think that happens quite a bit. I was watching a game, Triton Poker. It's on YouTube. They actually play short deck poker, which is really interesting. They take out they take out the 2s, 3s, 4s, and I think 5s. And so there's like all kinds of action. But anyway, like Tom Dwan was playing at a poker table with Jean-Robert Bolland and a bunch of other guys. I don't know if people may know these names. I don't know. But they're kind of big names in the poker world. Anyway, these two guys, apparently, Dwan has staked Jean-Robert like millions of dollars, like for years. And they were both playing at the same table. So I don't know how frowned on that is. Like McGuire's point of like, why would I, give him information? Why would I take a dive just so that he could win a big hand? I mean, but to her argument, there is a chance, but I just don't think that there's a whole lot you can do about collusion in poker. I don't know. I've always thought of like poker as like this kind of gentleman's game, and there's always like this gentleman's agreement that, you're there honestly to play this game, and you're not going to just try and cheat and that sort of thing. But
right, or there's an unwritten code like in Tombstone or in the Ballad of Buster Scruggs.
Yeah, there's like an unwritten code. And so, when you see someone cheating, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. If you find collusion happening, that's a big deal. And I guess she's a little bit right to be upset, but I don't know necessarily what you could do to stop it. And the idea that poker players stake each other, I guess, all the time. And it's not uncommon for that to happen. So anyway.
Okay, I'm going to loop this back around to one more topic, and then we'll probably need to do final summary review because we're already bumping up against time. Jiminy Christmas. So similar to the echo that we just talked about with Molly feeling the guilt for what she had done and then taking it out on someone else, and then that's echoed later with the father taking it out on Molly in their relationship. I think there's an echo with how the government treats Molly and how the mafia treats Molly. When she moved to New York and she's doing well, but then she's got $2.8 million out there on the street that she's staked out to people and not collected on. Those two Italian mafia guys from Jersey come and meet her and offer to collect her debts for her using strong arm techniques, right?
Yeah.
And she's like, "Oh no, I'm good. I'm comfortable with having that much money out there. I'll get it still. So no, thank you." And they send this thug goon guy, like big tough, like old guy, to basically work her over. because she
Oh yeah.
denied their services, that they demanded that this was basically a message to her like, hey, you're going to work with us or bad things are going to happen. You're not going to get another warning.
Just like the government.
Exactly, right? And so I just saw that as like a little snippet of, that 5 or 10 minutes portion of the movie was like an echo of the entire movie where the government comes after her, 17 agents, middle of the night, automatic weapons, pointed at her like she's some kind of a threat, you know?
Yep.
And then you've got this little, 5 minutes with the Italian mafia guys offering her a service that she doesn't want to pay for, doesn't want. And they're like, no, you're going to get the service and you're going to pay for it, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, man. It's a strong parallel. It's funny how the target of that whole investigation was the Russian mob. And she was like, well, the Russian mob never did anything mean to me at all. They seem to be like nice people. I never knew they were in the mob. The Italian mob and the government, on the other hand, yeah, I knew right away what they were about.
Yeah, exactly. Now, one last question for you related to the mafia beating her up. When her dad found out about it by reading the book and at the magical scene where they're at the skating rink, he says, I want them to suffer. And she's like, no, you don't. And he like repeats it multiple times.
Uh-huh.
I know where he's coming from. Like if somebody did something to my kids, I don't know what you could do to get me to not wish harm on someone. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I was 100% on board with Kevin Costner in that scene. Someone puts their hands on my daughter, beats the crap out of her, threatens to murder her, sticks a gun in her mouth. Yeah, it's probably going to be the last thing that asshole ever does. I wouldn't feel bad about it in the slightest. If I'm going to hire somebody to find him, hire some guy to take him out, or even just make him suffer, torture him, whatever.
This is all hypothetical.
Yeah, it's hypothetical, of course.
But you go Liam Neeson, right? You go
Liam Neeson on his ass. So you hire a guy with a particular set of skills, and you sleep better at night. And yeah, it probably increases the amount of sadness and violence in the world. But you're also sending a message that, don't fuck with me. You don't go around attacking people. We didn't start this.
Right. Yeah. Having the capacity to defend yourself means having power and the potential for danger, but that engenders respect.
Yeah, I was listening to the Babylon Bee podcast the other day, and they had Malice on. It's an older episode, but anything time Malice is on, I'm a fan. And he was saying how he's not this turn your other cheek kind of guy. He's like an eye for two eyes. He's an eye for two eyes kind of guy, and that's kind of where I'm at, especially when it comes to my imaginary daughter. If my imaginary daughter is getting attacked and almost murdered and threatened with her life and whatnot by some mafia thug trash guy, I'm probably doing what I can to take his ass out, and not feeling bad about it at all, and feeling like I did my job as a father to protect my family.
Right,
and that's what he's feeling, right? He's feeling like he failed as a father to protect his daughter.
Right. After making a fine point about how she thought he was a bad dad, and he's like, well, I did raise a neurosurgeon and a 3-time gold medalist skier, and you.
Right. Yeah.
I think it did okay. And one last thing I want to loop back to is the tweet about, Bernie Sanders and liability for all the damage that's been done. And we talked about how people want to go after gun manufacturers and whatnot. And I guess there's defense against that. Like they can't be held liable. But similar to the oil executives and making lives better, what about the 3+ million instances per year that the CDC estimates of defensive uses of a firearm to prevent criminal activity or violence? So you've got, on the one side of the equation, everyone's hopping mad about the bad things that do happen. And yeah, bad things do happen and they are bad. No disputing that. But there's an overwhelming amount of good that comes from those very same items.
yeah, this is just another case of, and it happens all over the time, all over the world, that anytime you get a service or a product that improves your life, and you get used to a certain kind of lifestyle, right? You get used to. Sorry about that. Hang on. You get used to a certain level, and you get soft. You get accustomed to it. Like, you begin to expect it. Like, I expect, my life to be comfortable and never anything bad to happen, and all this stuff. Like, if I get in a car accident, I don't expect to die because there's all these safety features and blah blah blah. But sorry, I'm just getting distracted by shit. Yeah. So then the good things.
Let's bring it home, Robert. Bring it home.
Yeah. So sorry about that. So the good things you get accustomed to them. You don't appreciate the good things in your life. You just point out the fewer and fewer bad things in your life, such as like manspreading and mansplaining and all this crap that people come up with to explain how oppressed they are. It just shows how decadent your life is, that these few tiny, relatively small problems are such a big deal, and you have so much free time to complain about them. It shows how good you got it. Because if you didn't have it so good, you wouldn't have time to complain about all this crap. You'd be too busy scrapping and scraping, making a living. So, thanks, capitalism.
Indeed, sir. Well, why don't we slide right into the final summary and review? Let's do the flop.
Flop the turn. Then the river. All right. So I don't think Molly's Game is the perfect movie. I watched it and I enjoyed it enough to recommend it for the show. Because of, it just kind of illustrates how the government acts, how they're a bunch of thugs, and how they go after people because it's convenient to them, not because, there's a real issue with these people being out on the street. They just, you get under the eye of Sauron and they will fuck you over. They'll rob you, they will strip you, and they'll be like, oh, then, by the way, you get the right to a speedy trial. So, you have to appear in front of a judge in the other side of the country in 2 days. Oh, and have a lawyer ready, present, and all this crap. I like Dan said, there are some issues with the story. I don't like the magical scene, but I appreciated, for the most part, the heart of the film. I liked Molly as a character. I didn't like, all the people I wasn't supposed to like. I thought it was pretty good. Then it involved poker, which I'm a huge fan of. I enjoy playing it. I enjoy watching it. So, this is more of a Homer type score for me because I enjoyed it. I don't think it has much replay value. I think once you've seen it once, I don't think you're going to go back to it. But for the first time watching, it was a good movie. I'm going to give it like a 7. Just a flat 7. So.
Lucky number 7 for your game of chance.
Baby.
Yeah, baby. All right. Well, I had higher expectations going into this, and that could be from the build-up based on the recommendation from my good friend Robert. But I found that it was a bit convoluted, hard to follow. Didn't really understand what the point of the story was. She kind of ends up getting screwed at the end anyway and somehow feels it's a victory, maybe because she got less screwed than she otherwise would have been. But it does show a determined woman who was going to be good at anything she focused on. And that is a big thing for me. I need to start focusing on things. But it was serviceable, and I think that Aaron Sorkin, he does bring the dialogue, and Chastain, the Molly's character, I enjoyed her. I thought that was well portrayed. Idris Elba hit it out of the park. He's always good on screen. Even Kevin Costner was pretty good. So I think this is a movie that had really good elements to it, just didn't come together for me. And it was a bit long, and it had a little bit too much weaving of extra storylines that didn't necessarily need to be there. But I guess it's supposed to fill out why this person is who she is. Why is she so driven? Why is she so principled? Why is she not willing to give anything up to the government? Even if it's information that they already had. Like in her book, she named 4 names, but she only named the 4 names that were already exposed out in the world from the Bad Brad deposition. And so she could use those ones only and still maintain her principles. So I don't know, it gave us plenty to talk about, but I like you said, I don't think it's something I'd ever watch again. So I'm going to go with a 6 on this bad boy.
That's a fair score.
Yeah.
It's respectable. It's above average. It's not great, but for what it was, I thought it was plenty good, and it gave us a good discussion.
Agreed, sir. Well, next week we promise to have an even better good discussion with our buddy Mike C. talking about the Warriors. Come out and play, yay!
Hopefully Mike C will dress up also. I want someone looking really tough and intimidating.
Right, and we will get our video working for next time for our Patreon supporters, so do check that out at lastnighters.com/Patreon. Get us at, I think, the $5 or $10 level per month, and you will be able to witness it live and on video and see Robert's pre-Halloween costumage.
Oh man, I look so tough in this jacket. You don't even know.
Do you look Nick Gillespie tough, leather jacket style?
I'm like Nick Cage.
Oh, like in Ghost Rider?
Yeah, Ghost Rider.
One of the
style.
worst movies ever made, I might add.
That's right. Looking tough.
All right, well, that's all the time we have tonight on The Last Nighters. We'll be back next week with the Warriors. If you like what we do here, do check us out on iTunes and give us a review or a rating. Subscribe on the old YouTubes. And send us all your money over at Patreon. Check it out at lastnighter.com/86 for show notes and more. And also find it at the Launchpad Media. Good night from last night, everyone. And just a few more minutes on the Actual Anarchy podcast. Robert's blowing up. He's got all sorts of messages and notifications. Some phone calls happening, so I know he's got something else he's got to do. And the battery on the device that I'm using to record our audio, which, by the way, should be much, much cleaner and crisper than all of our other audios ever before.
What?
I know. It's going to be high-end shit. And by shit, I mean...
some primo shit.
Our content is shit. But the battery on this is getting super, super low. So we probably don't have time to do Kathleen Turner Overdrive, which is just fine. We didn't have live stream, and we'll have very little pre-show and post-show content for everyone. But I promise we'll make it up to you next week when we do Warriors with Mike C.
Yeah, Mike C is a guy that can get damn verbose. He's a very smart individual, and he can speak. So we'll be giving it to you hard and long. All
night long. And he'll have an interesting story because apparently the local theater to him was doing a what do you call it, like a throwback Thursday or whatever, where they were going to show an old movie, and Warriors was one of them, and he went to it, and he didn't stay and watch it, and we'll find out why next week on the next episode of The Price is Right. I mean, Actual Anarchy podcast.
Ooh, I like that. A little tease for the next week. I like it.
That's right. So come back, join us next week. You can find the show notes and more for this one at actualanarchy.com/143. And do share it around with your friends and loved ones. Probably the Last Nighters version, right? It's a little less scary in the name. But we do appreciate you guys being our listeners. Give us some feedbacks and reviews and all that stuff. And just so you know, just throwing it out there, there's about 1,000 of you so far. So that's pretty good. We're one of the bigger shows in the world. But all the ones that we're bigger than, you've never heard of. So we're just on the cusp of being heard of.
That's exciting.
Yeah, so it's good stuff. So anyway, thank you guys for listening, and thank you, Robert, for being our guest tonight in the hot seat for Molly's game.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, you're welcome, and we'll see you guys all next week. Maximum freedom, everyone.
The Chipmunks. CHIPMUNK. We're the Chipmunks. Guaranteed to brighten your day. Do 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 do.
In the early days of the internet, radical libertarians were scattered, lonely, and faceless. Without direction, they resigned to scour the web, sifting through content providers in a wasteland plagued by YouTube demonetization, Facebook jail, and covert internet censorship. But then, in 2017, the Libertarian Union was formed. Finally, the average Joe libertarian could find a thriving community of independent podcasters and content providers, all in one convenient location. At Libertarian Union, we'll always have the latest news, interviews, discussions, and even movie reviews. With hundreds of episodes and more added all the time, you'll always find something fresh at libertarianunion.com.